what I'm calling some proofs of God. Now, these aren't like real proofs, because there's no thing that I could tell you that would say, oh yeah, that's the one that proves without a shadow of a doubt for all human beings, all time, that there is a God, He is the God of the Bible, and that works for me. So I'm going to give you 4 things that put together provide a very solid case, not just for God, but for the God of the Bible who revealed Himself in Jesus Christ. Okay, so here's the first thing. And the first thing that I got to tell you is that I put this phrase on your note sheet there, trustworthy equals hidden. And I'm going to explain that with this phrase. God's activity will always be explainable in naturalistic terms. Now check this out. If God is spiritual, then His working is going to be invisible to us, right? If He's spiritual, then what He does is going to be invisible to our scientific mindset. However, if God is consistent and active in this world, if He is consistent and He always does things according to His character, and He always does things the best way they can be done, the right way to be done, then what we're going to observe on our side of things is that the same things happen when the same things happen. Do the same cause and you're going to find the same effect. And it's going to be perfectly consistent. And if I jump up, I'm going to fall back down again. And if I eat Taco Bell, I'm going to be sick. The same things happen repeatedly over and over. See, if God is consistent, then we are going to see the world operate in a regular, naturalistic, scientifically verifiable way. Does that make sense? That means that if a scientist ever says to you, because we've discovered the laws of the universe, we have no need for God, you could say, because God is so trustworthy, we have no need to see Him all the time. If God is trustworthy, that means He can be hidden, and that's okay. I'll give you a tangible example of this. There are 3 ways to control an airplane. We have a couple pilots in the room here. So just raise your hand, say, yes, we know. There are 3 ways that I know about to control an airplane. One is called a mechanical system. I don't know the technical terms for it, but it's a mechanical system with wires or pulleys or something where when I push on the pedal, there's a little wire that runs back to the back of the plane, and it adjusts the flight surfaces or whatnot so that the plane's going to move, right? So that's a mechanical system. Sometimes it's rods, sometimes it's ropes, sometimes it's wires or something. Mechanical. There's a second way to control an airplane. The second way to control an airplane is called fly-by-wire. And what that means is that I'm sending electrical signals to motors at various parts of the plane. So when I push the pedal there, then what happens is it sends an electrical signal to the back of the plane. And in the back of the plane, there's a little motor that moves the flight surface so that the plane does what it's supposed to do. If I pull the stick or that kind of stuff. It's called fly-by-wire because it's electrical. Some systems are even going so far to make software-based fly-by-wire, but it's still fly-by-wire, okay? It's electrical systems. But there's a third way to control an airplane, and that's monkeys. You can put monkeys in the back of the airplane, and you can train them that when I step on the pedal, they get a shock. And when they get a shock on their right shoulder, they need to move this one lever, and it's going to adjust the flight surface. And if the monkeys were trained perfectly, and if the system worked perfectly, you would never know if the plane you're flying in is controlled by mechanics, electronics, or monkeys. Okay, right? You would never know. Or let's say maybe it's not monkeys. Let's say it's really intelligent people who for some reason got trapped in the back of the plane. It doesn't matter what's in there. If you push on the pedal and you get the same results, you can come up with multiple different conclusions. Obviously, this thing was designed to work on its own. Or you can come up with the conclusion that there are animals, or maybe there's an intelligent being controlling that thing. You're never going to know from the side of inside the plane. You're only going to know if you take it apart and begin to look at the stuff. That's the way our world is. And because God is spiritual, you're never going to be able to peel off enough layers to actually see Him, right? So the reason I'm getting with this is that there's a brand new series of books that have been coming out over the last couple years by writers like Stephen Hawking and Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett. And basically their approach is to say, because we've learned so much about the world and because we know so many of the rules about how the world works, we no longer need God. If evolution is true, if the Big Bang thing actually happened, we've figured it all out, we have no need for God. Even so far, I'm going to tell you something that's just going to blow your mind. Okay, so prepare. This is academic and weird. Stephen Hawking, in his latest book, just came out this last summer, basically says we don't need God. Why? Because the universe can create itself. How? Okay. There's something called the quantum vacuum. Are you familiar with this? You know the quantum vacuum? Okay, of course not, because no one does. The quantum vacuum is nothing, but it's a special name for nothing, and it's a special kind of nothing. This is a nothing from which the quantum vacuum virtual particles pop in and out of existence all the time. It's the fabric of space-time. If you take a proton, you know what a proton is, right? If you peel a proton apart, you're going to find quarks in there, and there's empty space between the quarks. And in between those quarks is this quantum vacuum. And what's happening in there is that constantly, randomly, positrons and electrons get created all the time and then disintegrate. It happens constantly. They come into being and then they disappear. They come into being and they disappear. And the average is zero. Okay, there's zero energy, there's zero mass. The average is zero, but it's really that things are happening. Okay. They believe that at the beginning of time, there was nothing, which means the quantum vacuum. And so, the universe was one of these little particles that popped into being and just grew so fast that it couldn't dissolve again. It outgrew the dissolving process. And so, lo and behold, we're here. Yay! So that's the theory. Okay, so I'm going to get to that. I'm going to come back to that in just a little bit. But it's important for you to kind of know about this because scientists are trying to say if we can explain a system that doesn't need God, that operates naturalistically, then we can say there is no God. And what I'm trying to say is just because it's reliable doesn't mean that God's not doing it. Okay? Let's move on. The other ones are going to blow your mind too. Okay, so here's the second one. The second one I call the cosmological argument. This is a standard argument for the existence of God, but I've modified it a little bit. Just write these words down and then I'll explain what they are. If anything contingent exists, there must be something necessary. The standard view of the cosmological argument goes like this. If anything begins to exist, it must have a beginning. If anything has been caused, it must have a cause. There must be a first cause for everything. I'm shifting it because I took philosophy and I can. Contingent